Hello and welcome to day 8 of 30 days of Photoshop, continuing day 2 of looking at selections because selections are so important to photographers. My name is Kevin Aronson from Hampshire School of Photography. Sit back and watch this and enjoy with a nice cup of coffee and learn about selections, but a little bit deeper. So selections really are quite a big part of the photographer's use in Photoshop, and we're going to kick off today looking at some of these selection tools here: the Lasso, the Polygonal Lasso Tool and the Magnetic Lasso Tool. And we're also going to be looking at the Quick Selection Tool and the Magic Wand Tool. Let's kick off then with what's been around the longest, these three. And Lasso Tool is simply you drawing your selection on the screen. So if I wanted to select that part of, this is up in Scotland, in a place called Tomartin, where they've got the brewery, Tomartin, not brewery, distillery, Tomartin whiskey. And now I've just selected that tool, and if I wanted to, I could change that tool, and so on and so forth. But it's not a very good way of selecting because it's quite blunt. You don't really have any fine control. And if I press enter here, you'll see I've enlarged part of the background, and the corrugated iron on this old chapel has been enlarged at a higher rate there than it is there. So it's not the best way to do things. Let's take this back. You don't get to use the Lasso tool very often, but there are some places where it's very useful, but that's beyond the realms of this teaching series. Magnetic. Let's drop to the bottom here. Magnetic. I've always hated this, and it's supposed to work like this. Let's zoom in to an area. Let's say we wanted to just select that red part of the tin roof there. So we click and drag and just keep clicking. And what it's doing, Photoshop is detecting the edges for you. And every now and then you have to keep clicking your mouse, or in my case I'm just tapping my Wacom pen on the Wacom tablet, same thing, and there we go, all complete. So it's not perfect. I can see down that wall there, if I zoom in on that, it hasn't been that accurate, and I think I might have tried to use this in my early days of Photoshop and never found it to be particularly successful. But you know, this would work here. It would work if we wanted, for instance, to change the colour of that to, I don't know, yellow, blue, whatever. Let's zoom back out. So you've got some control. I mean, it would work. It would work, but it's not a perfect selection tool. So I'm going to undo that one, which of course is Command or Control Z. And let's see how that would work around something like these windows, which are quite ornate-ish. So it's not bad, but it does do that kind of stuff now and again, which is really frustrating. See, I find this tool just a pain in the bottom. Let's undo that. And let's try again. I'm going to drag the tool around the edge rather than let it go. I'm letting it make its own decision about when to put in those little anchor points. There we go. So I wanted to put one in there. It's just not there. Give up. It's rubbish. Hate it. Get rid of it. Why bother Adobe even putting it in Photoshop? It may have been around in the early days, but it doesn't need to be around anymore. And then finally the Polygonal, or the Polygonal, I don't know how you pronounce it, Lasso tool. Now, this does kind of work. It helps to go in really close. And the way this works is you click to start it going, and then you move it to where you think it's a good place to stop. There's a bit of a curvature in here, so I don't want to drag it too far. Click, 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 click. And this works, and it can be pretty accurate. The problem with it is, yes, it's time consuming. Okay, down the straights. Let's go down the straights. But really good control here on those little twiddly bits. Fantastic up the straights. Just have to be a bit cautious on the curves. And as you approach the start, you get, I don't know if you can see that, just below that icon of the tool, a little, like a little O, little circle appears, and that means you've completed. If you click now, it'll complete and seal the unit. So I'm just going to do that, and there we go. And actually it's a pretty good, let's zoom out, pretty good selection. And if I wanted to change the colour of that, I could very easily, except it's white. So we'll do something else. That was silly of me. Let's try a different adjustment tool. So we could go brighter. It's affecting the whole window, of course, not just the white paint, the black inside. And we could make the windows look really black. Like that. Okay. So that tool definitely does work. Now the question I would be asking at this stage is, what if you're doing one of these things? Let's say it doesn't matter which tool you're using. We'll use the Polygonal Lasso Tool. I can't say it. And I've not even had anything to drink. Oh my gosh. So what happens if you're doing this, yeah, and you're not watching what you're doing? You have to be really drunk not to spot that, of course. I'm just rushing this. Just bear with me. Ah. Bother. I had the subtract from up there selected. Don't quite know how that happened. So we'll try again. So what if you'd made your selection and you really were quite slovenly, and you didn't notice that you'd gone outside the area there, inside there, and inside there. Well, this is where you go back to using these tools, and this is where I find this particular tool, the Polygonal Lasso Tool, works really well. So this has gone outside of the area I want, so I want to get rid of that. So I'm going to click on my negative here, my remove or take from, and I'm just going to go boom like that, and just click around that area, and it's gone. Now these two, I actually want those areas. I want that little triangle and that little bit at the top there to be in the selection. So I'm going to click on add, and I'm going to start from there. And so long as I make a complete circle on itself, it adds it in. There we go. So if you do miss stuff, it's very easy to repair the damage. Okay. Let's zoom back out. So what if we wanted to change the roof of this building, this kind of purpley roof, to the same colour green as the rest of the building? Lasso tool, we know, is completely unworkable. The magnetic, it would kind of do it, but it wouldn't be accurate. That one would do it really well-ish. It's just going to take a bit of time, so just bear with it. I'm going to actually rush this. I'm not going for accuracy here. All right, I'm just going to want to show you. Let me go down there. And of course we've got this corrugated area. So to do this with the Polygonal Lasso Tool, I said it there, didn't I? It would take a very long time to do it properly, because you'd be up and down all the corrugations. That's great on these straights. Okay, there it is. It's selected. It is selected. All right. Now then, stay put. There we go. It is selected. So I'm just going to bring up hue and saturation. And the colour I want to select is that purple. So we're going to select that. You'll learn all about hue saturation on another session, don't worry. And now, oh, look at that. Pretty good. Pretty good. Not bad. Let's look at a before and after. Before and after. I actually like what I've done with the windows by accident, you know, they're going really dark. I think it looks better like that than having the reflections on it. But we have done the job. It worked extremely well. As an alternative then, let's look at what we can do with some of the other tools we were looking at. So we've got the quick selection tool and the magic wand tool. Now I remember the magic wand tool being around for a very long time in the early days, and the idea is you click the magic wand on an area, on a colour for instance, and it finds other elements of that colour. Let's see what happens when I click on it. I'll take the tolerance down to 0. So it's not going to try and find any colours apart from exactly on the colour I hit on. Here we go. Okay. Kind of ish. And the more I tap on it, the more it does to find. I mean, it's starting to find. But now look, I've got stuff going on over here. So let's deselect it, and we'll pick contiguous. Contiguous means it only finds it in its immediate area. That's no good. We're going to have a tolerance which is much more forgiving than that. There we go, that's better. And again, it's starting to drop over the size. So we probably could do it, but we'd have to faff backwards and forwards with different tolerances. Don't really like the tool. I think, see, it will work in something like this, where there's a lot of blue, which is fairly even, and doesn't change too much. It goes a bit bright down here, but generally speaking, that's a nice clear background. I can click on that background, and it's done a reasonable job. This tells me that it hasn't actually done the whole of the bottom, so I'm going to click on that and a bit more, and that's it. The whole area has been selected. If I hit delete, it should show me what's behind, and Command D to deselect, and there we go. I've got a clock against in this case a grey green background. The tool itself did a very reasonable job because we weren't asking it to do something complicated, so you wouldn't want to use it in an area where the colours are crazy and there's lots of detail. Really, all we're up against here is a blue sky and a bit of black, so it was very simple for it. Other than that, the tool is completely useless. By far better is the quick selection tool. So we'll go back to the original image of this Brethren Chapel in the Highlands. And the Brethren are well known for not wanting their luxuries at all. And this thing's made out of corrugated iron. Must be freezing in the winter. But then Scotland is not a warm country anyway. So they're a hardy lot. I'm sure they get by fine. So I'm now using the quick selection tool. And if I drag it over an area, look how quick it found that. Look how quick it found that. I'm going to undo that. I usually, to be honest, like to have a smaller brush because I find when brushes are too big, it's quite easy for the selection to go over the side. So I tend to find using a small one is more helpful. It just means you've got to drag it further. So here we go. Boom, 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 boom. Hasn't quite got that thing. It hasn't quite got the parapet there, but it's got that one. And as we only want to change the colour of the roof, I actually don't want that. So what I'm going to do is just go over to the Lasso Tool, paint with a negative. Remember the negative which takes stuff away? Zoom in. Maybe a little bit. There we go. That's actually, this one goes down the V, so we'll go down a V with this one. There we go. And zoom back out. Right, so I've now got the roof selected, and by doing it that way, if I'm right, it's probably also followed the path of the corrugation, which it has. See, I couldn't have done that with any other tool, so I like this tool. And if you want to change the colour of that. Again, we'll sample that colour so we know which colour we're changing, and then boom, fantastic. By far the easiest solution. So that's before, that's after, before, after. And what colour green did we get? Oh, so the other one benefited from the window. But I think you probably saw that the whole thing was so much quicker with the quick selection tool. Let's just try and do this very quickly. Oh, it's done. How about that? It's done. Sample of colour, bit of green, maybe the other way. It's not quite the same colour as the tin on the large part of the roof. Let's zoom out and see what we got. So I guess that colour kind of works because it's showing a greater level of reflection. So we could get by with that. Okay, so selection tools. Lasso is really quite a blunt instrument. Magnetic, old school. I wouldn't touch it. That one, the middle one, is easy. It just takes a bit of time because you're doing everything manually. And then below it we've got the quick selection tool and the magic wand tool, which we don't ever want to use. Now the thing is, once you pick any of these selection tools, you get this dialog box across the top, and as soon as it does appear, you've got this thing called select subject. Let's go to this couple here. Select subject. If I choose another tool, that disappears. So you've got to be one of these selection tools that you're picking. When you pick select subject, Photoshop tries to figure out what the subject is, works its magic, and it selects them. How about that? Done a pretty good job. Not perfect. There's some issues there. Look at this. And how would we correct that? I would correct that personally with a Polygonal Lasso Tool. And let's see whether we can add that to it. And so long as the circle is completed. Oh, I did the wrong one. I did a plus instead of a negative. Let's undo that. See, I make mistakes. I want the negative. I want to get rid of there. I won't go further up. The arm goes up to there. I'm really rushing this. I would honestly take more time if I was doing this for real. And there we go. And we've got some stuff going on here which I'd probably get rid of using the same negative selection. You don't always have to go right up there looking for the little dot, little circle to appear. You can actually double click anywhere and it completes the circuit, so to speak. But you see, I'm having to actually now do quite a bit. And this is where, if you've not done a photo shoot with people like this was an engagement shoot about 12 years ago, something, maybe like that, maybe 11 years ago. And I hadn't in mind when I took this shot of cutting them out from the background or selecting them. And if you are thinking about taking a photograph of someone or something, don't take it against a background like this. It is a living nightmare, because doing any kind of selection against something which has such a wide variety of tones is asking for trouble. Are we still on negative? We are, so we'll use that negative to remove some of this stuff. This is a long teaching session, this one, because it's a subject which has got a number of elements to it, and I do want you to see. I'm really rushing this, just bear with. I know it's not super accurate, guys. There we go, that's better. And I would do it for all of that, and then once they're selected, then I can cut them out from the background or change the color into something. But you know, there we go, the selection tools again: lasso, polygonal, magnetic, and then just below it we've got the quick selection tool and the magic wand tool. And once you're in there, that select subject button is available to you. Let's just try on here. So if I click on select subject now, let's see whether it actually finds. Wow. So it's found the main clock and not bothered with, it's got a little bit of the railings there, but it hasn't bothered with that. What about, geez, that's asking for it. That's asking a lot. Let's try a different image. Oh, yes. What about the chapel, the Brethren Chapel? Will it find that? Here we go. It has found that. So the marching ants are going around the roof. They've gone up a couple of the wires, around the top there, around the bottom, over the bushes. Hey, that's incredible. It's very clever. So we would want to get it off the wires. So again, I use the Polygonal tool with the negative option selected, and boom, 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 boom. There we go. Down here, a bit more complicated because you've got it shooting through the bushes, but let's not worry too much about that. Let's see what happens if we try and change the colour of that. Yeah, it's working pretty well, isn't it? It's deselect. Click OK, deselect. OK. Yeah, OK. Lovely. Hope you got that. A lot to take in, a lot to go and play with. I'll hand you back to the studio, as they say on television. And now I'll hand you back to Kev at the studio. Thanks, Kev. That was great, wasn't it? Kev was so good. So, what a subject. And we haven't finished yet. Selections is a big subject. And Photoshop, to me, could really do with pruning some of the buttons that it's got in the tool menu. They're old technology. They don't work very well. I'm sure some people would moan if they were taken away, but really the time wasted on those silly tools by people who are just starting with Photoshop and not getting a successful selection must be quite frustrating. Thank you so much for watching. I'm delighted that you're taking an interest in Photoshop. If you're not watching this in the blog, if you found it elsewhere on the internet, then the whole 30 days of Photoshop can be found on the blog, which is phototeacher.blog. Okay, you can check out our website for our proper classes, physical classes inside our training centre in Fleet in Hampshire, and that's on our website gohsp.com. gohsp.com. See you tomorrow, where we're going to be cutting stuff out. Very exciting.